Hi everybody, it's Cash. Welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me. Today I want to tell you what happened when I went into the energy of Dame Jane Goodall, the anthropologist, the conservationist, the environmentalist, the activist, an absolutely phenomenal woman. She died in Los Angeles at the age of 91 while on a speaking tour. In fact, she would have been giving her speech today, the day I'm recording this. Many people have asked for her transition. I don't do transitions of people who've just died generally. I will, though, give you her crossover pictures. The difference between a crossover and a transition when I do them is that for a crossover, I simply follow the energy through, like wandering behind somebody as they stroll through a park. Whereas a transition is a full-blown analysis. I go into the emotions, I take them all the way to ascension. But I don't tend to do transitions and do all of that when people are still mourning their death. However, Jane Goodall was such a remarkable presence on the planet. We are so privileged, so lucky to have somebody like that among us that I thought I would do her crossover. And the pictures are very, very interesting. When she was young, really, really young, her father, instead of a teddy bear, gave her a stuffed monkey as a toy. And she became so enamored with that stuffed toy that it sparked something within her. And she knew intuitively what her soul's path was going to entail. Moving to Africa, or living in Africa, or working in Africa, something like that. And that's exactly what happened. She moved to Kenya after leaving Cambridge University, I think. She moved to Kenya and then set up a nature reserve in Tanzania where she studied chimpanzees. Not just studied them, though, explored the full range of their social life, their mannerisms, their ability to use tools. They would build rods and fish with them, which Jane Goodall discovered. Up to that point, it had been a very male-dominated field and very stuffy and very narrow-minded, and people would go, they're just monkeys, they're fascinating, sure, and we should conserve them, sure, but they're still monkeys. Jane Goodall said, no. And she studied a group of chimpanzees, won their trust, and discovered that they had all kinds of other things going on, including, apparently, a spiritual life and an ability to form a society with hierarchies and so on. And for this, she became really well known. She wrote, I think, 32 books. She was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Joe Biden and made a dame by Queen Elizabeth II. She was also given several honorary doctorates, I think, but was celebrated all over the world as an ambassador for peace and for respect for animals and for love of nature. She was raised as a Christian, but as she grew older, she stepped out of religion and embraced a greater sense of spirituality, which makes her even more interesting. So she had that depth. She didn't discount the fact that man and God and animals are all part of the same thing. I met her once at the Lincoln Center in New York. I was due to give a presentation there on the stage, and she was another presenter at the same event. There were loads of famous people dotted around the place. But what was particularly fascinating was that the moment Jane Goodall stepped on that stage, there was a sense of reverence fell over the entire place. All these successful actors and performers of different kinds and producers and whoever else was there, they stopped what they were doing to look at Jane Goodall on the stage and listen to what she said. She had a presence to her. She was demure, she was self-contained and self-aware, and you couldn't help but want to know what she had to say. She felt special. She felt different in a way. People were in awe because none of them, no matter how accomplished they were, these people, they had not done what she did. They had not had the courage to do what she did. And they respected that in an almost palpable way. You couldn't help but say, wow, when you saw Jane Goodall. But she died this week at the age of 91 of natural causes, we're told. So I thought I'd take a quick look at her crossover, see what I could see. And when I went into her energy, she was inching her way down a gradient, down a path that was sloping at quite an angle. And in the picture, she was clutching on to the sides. That's just age. The fact that she was willing to go on a speaking tour at 91 is commendable in itself. But there was a sense of decline in her consciousness, like she was approaching the end and she must have known it at a deep level. As she continued on down this path, there was a tunnel entrance. When I see these tunnels, that's usually the soul's invitation to depart, to accept that the next phase is about to begin of our evolution. And when I went into that tunnel, I could see it sloped downwards, and at the end of it was that cave that I always see. But she chose not to go down there, as far as I can tell. It was a little bit hazy, but I sensed that there was some other factor that prevented her. A sense of obligation, a sense of duty, something she'd agreed to, maybe this tour. But there was something that prevented her taking that step. And she simply continued going on down the path. But at a consciousness level, aware that she was possibly overstretching herself at this point. She was trying to do the right thing by others, maybe, but not necessarily by herself. And the path went down and down and down, and then it carried on going down in a different direction. And I sensed that she felt weaker at this point. There is a tremendous willpower that humans have to continue. I have a friend who's 99 and an archaeologist and is very, very sparky and bright. Just physically, she's weak, but mentally she is determined to continue. And she overrides all obstacles to stay and be alive and do her work. And I guess the same was true of Jane Goodall. She responded to duties, she responded to obligations and wouldn't be deterred. But it was obvious from the pictures, at least, that she was getting weaker. And at the bottom of this other slope, there was a second tunnel, and this she knew was it. She stood at the tunnel entrance and felt relief, I thought, that she'd done her bit. She'd gone as far as she could, given all she could, and now she sought the relief of moving on to the next level. And what was fascinating was that this relief was displayed in the pictures by her slipping off her shoes before she entered the tunnel. She took off her shoes, left them at the entrance, said to life, said to the people she was leaving behind and her favoured animals and so on, there, you can have those. That's what I'm leaving behind. You get to wear them now. And very gently she stepped into the tunnel, into the unknown. Once she was in that tunnel, there was a slope upwards that led into a cavity. The cavity didn't go anywhere as far as I can tell, but it was almost like she could hold off longer if she chose to. She could decide to pause, to stay, to extend her mortal life by hours or days or whatever, if she chose to. But in the picture, she didn't go up there. she went around. That offer was turned down. She was committed at this point. The tunnel went around and then down. And this was where her consciousness released her mortal self and released the world of form, the physical, and embraced the non-physical. She reached the bottom of the tunnel, and there was that cave again that I always see. But this was remarkable because she stood there like you would stand on a mountain breathing the air. I don't know if you've ever done that, but it's so exhilarating. And it was like that. She stood at this cave entrance, which doesn't really exist, by the way. It's just a way that I can tell how their consciousness is responding to the process. She stood there and she paused. She waited for something to embrace her. And I don't think it was like God or anything. It was just this next phase. She knew she was moving on and she wanted to savor the release of her old self. And, you know, in movies like The Wizard of Oz, where the film goes from black and white to colour, magically and wonderfully. That's what this was like. It was almost like her world had turned from black and white to colour. And now everything that had maybe plagued her body in terms of feeling unwell or restrictions or whatever she was feeling, attachments, anything that was pressing down on her, it all went and was replaced by colour, by a new kind of life, the spiritual life. This was a very, very mature soul. Somebody who really understood both life and possibly death, or what death entails in the complex matrix of life in the universe and so on. She seemed very connected to that and very open to that. And in her own case, embraced it and welcomed it and said, here I am. I'm ready for whatever comes next. And there was no dawdling, really. The tunnel was there, the one I see that connects people to their point of ascension, and she walked up that. Although, as a particularly interesting point to note, there were steps, like rocky steps, halfway up. If they'd been small, it's the kind of thing you would stub your toe on in the dark, because you didn't see it. But they were bigger than that. And I think they represented something she still had to learn. I mean, we all have things to learn in every lifetime. That's why we keep coming back. And our soul keeps returning so that we can learn and grow. And she still had things to process from her life. Ego issues or attachments or something that would trip her up in the dark if she didn't see them or question them or address them or something. And she went around them rather than over them, but with great awareness at a consciousness level of what had gone undone or what had gone unsaid or where she could have done better or where her ego had tripped her up in life, something like that. It was a lesson, or three, I think. I think there were 3 steps, 3 lessons that she had to at least appreciate existed, even if she didn't learn from them. And then the tunnel continued, but it didn't lead to the light directly. There was a tributary where if you turn left, I saw a hill that she had to climb, and the light was at the top of it. And although I didn't take her all the way up to the light, because again, this isn't a transition, but although I didn't take her up there, I got a very definite sense that this hill at the very end was a breathing space. for contemplation, for pulling all the strings together. It was about her. It wasn't about Grace. It wasn't about anything like that. It was about her assimilating, her processing, her taking what she had learned in life and integrating it with what she was now starting to understand about the process of transitioning and ascension. She considered, she pondered, she thought as she made it up this hill. Hills are usually representative of challenges, actually, so maybe this was a challenge in some way. But she pondered and she considered, and a lot of things went through her consciousness in those last few seconds. But she went up the hill and I'm assuming just went into the light. But it was absolutely fascinating. She had done so much good in her life, had been so influential in her life. She had her own institute. She had programs for children and to train people and teach people about animals and respect for the planet and other species and so on. Maybe that climb at the end was about evaluating whether she'd done enough, whether she could have done more, the state of the world that she was leaving behind. There could have been a tinge of regret or sadness or whatever in those final few steps. But she did enough, I would say. She couldn't have accomplished more if she'd tried. What's remarkable, I think, overall, is that she just knew this was her destiny. Her soul sang when she got that monkey from her father. And he was, at a soul level, instructed or programmed to give her that monkey that would trigger her destiny. And I sometimes wonder if we don't all have that. We just don't pay enough attention. We all have some destiny, some soul's path, some purpose, some mission in life that we need to find. There are so many pressures on young people, particularly now, to get a job, earn good grades, live in a certain way, believe certain things, sign up for a specific lifestyle. The parents want certain things for them, their peer group wants certain things. There's so many pressures. And these extraneous voices can drown out the whisper, and it is very often just a whisper, of the soul that's saying, shut all that out and focus on what you're here to do. And I think many people do get to the ends of their mortal lives this time around feeling that they missed their calling, or they took the wrong fork in the road, or with regret that they didn't listen to themselves, they listened to other people. I definitely feel there are quite a few people who become doctors when they wanted to be ballet dancers, or they become lawyers when their soul was screaming at them to become a poet or something like that. I don't know. But I get that feeling that a lot of people do that. And she was somebody who knew. She knew at a very, very young age that she wanted to live in Africa, work with animals, and she simply allowed the voice of her soul to guide her to her destiny. And that takes tremendous amounts of courage, to shut out the world and listen to the voice of your soul. So I think we have lost a quite remarkable individual. And certainly when I met her at the Lincoln Center, I got a firm sense of this woman being a force of nature, actually, in the literal sense of the word. There aren't many people in life, and I've met a lot of famous people. There aren't many people in life who are received in that kind of way. who inspire awe rather than adulation and excitement and praise or whatever, who inspire awe among their fellow humans. But Jane Goodall was one of those. And clearly, even in her transition period, even as she was crossing over, she was able to embrace the next phase with the same vigor and the same sense of analysis and contemplation and whatever that she had in her mortal life. We can all learn from that. In fact, that's what I learned from Jane Goodall. Thanks a lot, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.